hoarding hunger. What are the symptoms of food hoarding? Is it actually food addiction? Recent research suggests that these seemingly distinct conditions may share more in common than we once thought. Let's look first at the symptoms of food hoarding, and then we will see the surprising similarities between hoarding and food addiction. Although hoarding is different, there are enough similarities that are intriguing and that might help us with the treatment of both conditions. What is hoarding? We'll start with that. Hoarding disorder is a mental health condition characterized by the persistent difficulty in discarding or parting with possessions regardless of their actual value. This results in excessive clutter that significantly impairs daily living and quality of life. Hoarding can be characterized into three main types: animal hoarding, object hoarding, and food hoarding. Although these distinctions depict specific objects being hoarded, food hoarding often overlaps animal and object hoarding, making it the most common of the three types. Indeed, in a study comparing of object and animal hoarding, it was found that hoarding of food or garbage was apparent in 80% of the cases. What's the prevalence? How much does this exist in society? Studies estimate that between 2 and 6% of the global population suffers from hoarding disorder. In the United States alone, that translates to 5 million to 14 million people. Hoarding disorder affects individuals of all ages, genders, and backgrounds, with higher rates observed in older adults. Research has uncovered strong link between hoarding disorder and obesity. A staggering 92% of diagnosed American hoarders were found to be overweight or obese in one study. Hoarders were nearly 3 times more likely to be overweight or obese compared to their family members. This suggests that there are shared underlying factors contributing to both hoarding behavior and weight struggles. We also know that at least 50% of those struggling with obesity are also addicted to food. Studies have shown a significant overlap between hoarding disorder and binge eating disorder. Over a quarter of hoarders meet the criteria for an eating disorder, with binge eating disorder being the most common. Additionally, hoarding severity has been positively associated with binge eating severity, further highlighting the connection between these conditions. Now, it's interesting that binge eating disorder is often lumped in with food addiction. Although they are separate conditions, there's a lot of binge eating diagnoses that should be diagnosed as food addiction. Let's have a closer look at what food hoarding actually looks like. What are the actual symptoms of food hoarding disorder? Food hoarding, remember, is a subtype of hoarding disorder that involves an excessive acquisition and storage of food items. But I want to make a point. This is not simply having a lot of stuff in the house. Hoarding disorder interferes with a person's ability to live a healthy, functional life, while having a lot of stuff around may just be a matter of personal preference or organization. So let's look at specific symptoms of food hoarding disorder. Compulsively clipping coupons and then buying items in bulk, regardless of the actual need or storage capacity. Excessive grocery shopping. Filling pantries, cupboards, refrigerators, freezers to the point of overcrowding and disorganization. You will see that with a food hoarder, and you'll see that with a food addict. Stockpiling large quantities of food, often far beyond what can be reasonably consumed before expiration dates. Stealing or hoarding food from work, restaurants, or other sources. Accumulating food to the extent that it takes over living spaces, making rooms unusable for their intended purposes. What's behind this is an emotional attachment to the food, so the person will experience significant distress or anxiety at the thought of discarding food, even if the food is inedible or past its expiration date. The person is attributing a sentimental value to the food items that makes it hard to part with them. You have a sense of security or comfort by having this excessive amount of food on hand, even if it's expired or spoiled or moldy, creating an unsanitary or potentially hazardous living conditions. A person in this situation will have a home that attracts pests like rodents or insects due to the presence of rotting food. What about cluttered living spaces? The person can't get around in the kitchen to cook new food or even bring fresh food in. Tripping hazards caused by the clutter or obstructed walkways. What about fire hazards due to the accumulation of combustible materials like paper bags and cardboard boxes? Think Amazon boxes that might block exits and pathways. Finally, structural damage to the home due to the excessive weight of hoarded items. Overall, food hoarding can significantly impact an individual's physical and mental being, as well as their ability to maintain a safe and functional living environment. The result of that will lead to social isolation, strained relationships, financial difficulties, and potential legal issues. This is a description that fits addiction as well as hoarding. What is the addictive nature of hoarding, or is there one? Like other addictions, hoarding disorder is characterized by compulsivity, obsession, and lack of control over the person's behavior. Individuals with hoarding disorder may experience intense urges to acquire and save items, even when it leads to negative consequences. Hoarding disorder and addiction share this hallmark feature of compulsivity and obsession. Individuals with these disorders do both experience intense urges to engage in their respective behavior and spend significant amount of time preoccupied with thoughts, in this case with food hoarding, related to acquiring, saving, and consuming. Now, other similarities are that hoarding behaviors and food addiction may serve as a maladaptive coping mechanism for dealing with underlying emotional distress like anxiety, depression, and anxiety. Indeed, the act of acquiring and saving objects or using a drug provides temporary relief and escape from difficult emotions. Childhood experiences like neglect and abuse and food insecurity are risk factors for developing either disorder, addiction, or hoarding disorder. And early traumas can shape a person's relationship with food, leading to a sense of scarcity and insecurity and a need to hold on for emotional comfort. Another commonality between hoarding disorder and addiction is the secrecy and shame that often accompany these behaviors. Individuals may go to great lengths to hide their hoarding or their eating from others, fearing judgment or criticism or embarrassment. This secrecy can lead to social isolation, which will then further perpetuate the emotional distress and the maladaptive coping of the addictive behavior. So, is food hoarding a separate mental disease, or is it actually a form of addiction, in this case, a form of food addiction? Or can a person be dual diagnosed and be suffering from one or both of these conditions? In my book, Food Junkies, Recovery from Food Addiction, I talk about a character, Lawrence, a morbidly obese heroin addict who lived amongst his possessions that started at the stairwell leading up to the top floor of his apartment into his warehouse apartment, and it had columns of books and stuff that towered over his bed, which was the only open space in the whole floor. I was treating him for his heroin addiction, but he was clearly a hoarder as well. So, are they the same thing? Is food hoarding a form of food addiction? Here's the difference. With food addiction, the compulsive behavior revolves around the actual consumption of the food, the binging on large quantities of food, and experiencing intense cravings for the food, or using food to cope with emotions or to experience heightened pleasure. However, in food hoarding, the fixation is not primarily on eating the food itself, but rather on acquiring and saving it. The hoarding stems from the deep-rooted fear of scarcity or a need for control, often, as I said, linked to past food insecurity or neglect. The person may not actually be overeating or even binging on the stockpiled food. Their compulsion centers more on the acquisition, the stealing and the hiding and the accumulating of the food, whereas the food addict, it's all about the eating of the food itself. Are they actually a form of addiction, one acquisition and one the consumption? I think that's a very likely possibility. In essence, food hoarding can occur with food addiction. It can be a distinct condition driven by different motivations, but it could also be a similar process. Recognizing the distinctions and the similarities would be crucial in tailoring the effective interventions for both conditions. Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with hoarding or food addiction, either the acquisition of food or the overconsumption of food, there is help available. With the right support and treatment, it's possible to break free from the cycle of compulsive behaviors. The addiction framework and the addiction toolwork has a whole set of techniques and approaches available for recovery and to ultimately achieve well-being. There is help out there. The power is ours. Thank you.